located at the end of the report. However, these days it's more popular to put it as a second paragraph after the introduction. It should not be included in the introduction paragraph for a data diagram. So from the examiner's point of view, it doesn't matter if the introduction is in the traditional way at the end of a paragraph, at the end of your task 1 report. It doesn't matter. But as I explained to my students, it's quite often better to write it as a second paragraph, because then you can use the overview to help you focus on your body paragraphs. Examiners definitely do not like the introduction being a second sentence of the introduction paragraph. They don't like it because when they mark your writing, actually the first thing they look for is your overview. And if they have to spend time looking for it, they're not very happy. So the overview paragraph should begin with a word or phrase such as overall, or to sum up, or in summary. Never use the phrase in conclusion. Task 1 writing, we do not have conclusions. Conclusions are for task 2 writing. In task 1, it is a summary, which is not the same as a conclusion. Then for a data diagram, the overview will be different depending on whether the diagram is dynamic or static. So a dynamic diagram will have a time period. So for example, a line graph will nearly always be dynamic, while a pie chart is usually static. So let's look at overviews for combination diagrams. So an overview for combination data diagrams should be one sentence, 25 to 35 words long, describing one main trend from each diagram, using the words such as and or while to link two trends together. And that will happen with, so taking one main trend from each diagram is the examiner's requirement, and if you don't do that, it will severely reduce your overall band score. It often happens that with a combination diagram, one of the charts is dynamic, so a line, a bar graph, while the other is static, pie chart or table. It is possible to have both diagrams as static, a pie chart and a table, although rarely will you get two dynamic diagrams, in other words, two line graphs or bar charts. So for a dynamic diagram, the first thing to look for is have the overall numbers or percentages increased or decreased. Additional trends could be how the data has changed. So is it fluctuating? What is the most important or significant piece of data, or what piece of data has changed the most? Describing something as the highest or lowest is not acceptable in a good overview. A good overview must cover the whole time period. So I quite often see students writing in overviews highest or lowest. Those kinds of comparative expressions should go in the body paragraphs, not in an overview. For a static overview, the focus should be on the most important, with a general statement for the second trend describing how important or less important the other data criteria are. So let's go back to our example diagram. All right, and let's have a look. So what are the trends here for an overview? Well, if we look at the line graph, we can see that all three lines over the complete period of time, so that's 1900 to the year 2000, have increased. They may have increased at a different rate of increase, but they have all definitely increased. Therefore, that gives you the clue for your overview. And when we look at the table, well, we can see there are really big differences between Brazil and the Congo. So we've got a population difference of 176 million and 5.2 million. Irrigated land, 26,500 square kilometers to 100 square kilometers, and water consumption by person, 359 cubic meters to 8 cubic meters. So there are really big differences in numbers. So how can we put that into an overview? So when we analyze this diagram, so we have a dynamic diagram, the line graph, and the table is static because the information is only for 1 year. So always try and write the overview in the same order as the diagrams. In this case, it will be the line graph first, followed by the table. Both diagrams are fairly simple, so this should mean that the overview does not need to be complex. The trend in the line graph is upwards, and it is clear that water consumption in Brazil is a lot higher than the Congo. This needs to be shown in one sentence like this. So the overview is overall, water usage by global sector increased throughout the period, whilst Brazil's consumption was considerably higher than the Congo. That overview, there's nothing complex there. It's straightforward, easy to read, and it ticks all the boxes that the examiner wants from you. As I mentioned before, do not try and overcomplicate things. Just write it as you see it, because the examiner will probably see it, the diagram in a similar way to you. So don't try and overcomplicate things. Let's have a look at the body paragraphs. So when it comes to body paragraphs, the structure for a combination diagram is nearly always 2 body paragraphs, one for each diagram. If there are 2 graphs and a lot of information, you will have to be careful not to describe everything, as you may then have too much information. Also, the examiner is looking to see that you can select the most important things and not describe every detail. So the key skill when you have 2 graphs is being able to pick out the important information or summarize things in a concise way. Otherwise, you will end up writing too much and probably run out of time. So let's go back to the diagram. So we've clearly got to, in the first paragraph, describe the line graph. And key features, as I mentioned before, is an increasing trend of water consumption by sector. We need to clearly state which sector is using the most water, which sector the least, and we can put in a few numbers So the obvious numbers would be in the year 1900 and at the end, the year 2000. And if we can do some comparison of those numbers, then that could help you improve your band score. When we look at the table, it's a straight comparison between two sets of numbers. So the examiner would be looking for comparative language. And in that comparative language, what are the actual differences? So let's have a look at the body paragraphs. So when looking at the bar graph, it can be seen that from 1900 to about 1960, all three lines show either a gradual or slight increase in water use. So notice how I have introduced a paragraph. I have used a linking phrase, and this is often forgotten by students when writing their task 1 reports. You are expected to use linking phrases in task 1 writing, just like you would have to use in essay writing, although obviously the linking phrases are different. Let's have a look at the next sentence. Both industrial and domestic use begin at the small. I think that should be the same amount. I think that's a typing mistake. Yeah. Just change it. Corrected. Same amount of square kilometre, with agriculture considerably higher. That's about 500 square kilometres. After 1960, each type of use increased significantly faster, with agricultural usage ending the period at nearly 3,000 square kilometres, industrial having about 2/3 less, and domestic at just about 500 square millimetres. So what I have done there in that sentence is actually analysed. I have used two pieces of data, 3,000 square kilometres and 500 square kilometres. But for industrial use, I have analysed by doing a comparison. I haven't used the numbers from the graph. I have said it's 2/3 less use. And that is an example of analysing. And the examiners like to see you try and do a little bit of analysing. I advise my students that each body paragraph, if possible, should have one example of analysing. Don't do any more than that, because if you do, it kind of overcomplicates your description of the diagram for the reader. You only need one example in each paragraph. When we look at the table, so again, look at the linking phrase, the table focuses on. So the reader knows then what you're going to describe and compare. So the table focuses on the consumption of water, comparing the population with irrigated land and water use per person. So Brazil's numbers are huge compared with the Congo, so I've done a comparative expression, huge, with its population being 170 million people, higher compared with the latter's much smaller 5.2 million. So I haven't written that Brazil's population is 175 million. I've said what the difference is, and then I've used 5.2 million from the diagram. Then the next sentence, the Congo's irrigated land is tiny. So again, I've used a comparison expression. It's tiny in comparison to Brazil's 26,500 kilometres, whilst water consumption per person is 40 times higher by Brazilians. So the only number that I've used from the diagram is 26,500. I've used comparative expressions to compare the other numbers. In other words, I'm analysing. Let's have a look at a different example. So here we have a pie chart and a table. And this, if I remember, was in one of the Cambridge IELTS books. I can't remember which number, maybe about number 8 or number 9 that I've taken it from. And here we have a pie chart and a table. So if we look at the question, the pie chart shows the main reasons why agricultural land becomes less productive. The table shows how these causes affected 3 regions of the world during the 1990s. Summarise the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So the pie chart's fairly simple. We have overgrazing, overcultivatation, deforestation, and other. You don't need to speculate what other means, just accept that there are other causes. And the table's a bit more complicated. We have 3 regions of the world: North America, Europe, and Oceania. So Oceania is basically Australia and New Zealand. And we have 4 categories: deforestation, overcultivatation, overgrazing, and total land degraded. So there we have 12 pieces of information in comparison with only 4 for the pie chart. So a good answer here would find it not too difficult to describe the pie chart, and the real more difficult task is to select the best information from the table. So in the question above, we are asked to summarize both a pie chart and a table. Students normally score lower on these types of questions, not because they are more difficult, because they are unfamiliar with this type of question. So what I'm going to do here, I'll discuss some common problems, suggest solutions to these problems, give you a structure that can be used again and again for these questions, and analyze a sample answer. So, what are the common problems? Well, firstly, writing too much. Because there is more than one data source, students tend to write about everything, and this causes 2 problems. So the first problem is you only have about 20 minutes to answer task 1 questions, and you therefore don't have time to write about everything. The second problem is that the question asks you to summarize and report the main features. Therefore, you have to pick only a few features and report them. In other words, if you write about everything, you have not answered the question properly. When it comes to solutions, so pick 2 of the most obvious features from each graph and limit yourself to writing about these things and these things only. Don't worry about leaving information out. The examiner will be actually looking for your ability to leave insignificant information out, because this shows that you are summarizing and only reporting the main features. More on how to do this in the question and the list below. And finally, if you can't find the main features, this is related to the first point, as stated above. You'll be looking for just 2 features in each graph. It is often really difficult for students to decide which features are the most significant. So, solution. The first important point should be very visual. By that I mean you should be able to identify them without looking at the data, just by looking at the graphs. Also look for extremes, so highs and lows, major trends, major changes from beginning to end, and any obvious comparisons that can be made either between either the two graphs or within the same graph. Remember that the most obvious things are the main features. The examiners are not trying to trick you. They want you to tell them the really obvious things about the graph. So don't get too clever and try to find something less obvious. Another issue is not grouping information into paragraphs. It is very important that you organize your ideas into paragraphs. Paragraphs should be logical and have one main idea. Lots of students fail to do this because they get confused between the multiple pieces of data in the question and the group data from different graphs into one paragraph. This is very difficult to read and understand, and you will lose marks if you do this. So, organization is really important. Next one, don't write about both graphs in one paragraph. Follow the structure I suggest below. Group ideas for each paragraph separately. That is one paragraph for one graph. Making comparisons. The question states make comparisons where relevant. And the key word here is relevant. And this is what tricks many students. Sometimes there will be a relevant comparison to make, but in some questions there will not. Some students see two different graphs and assume there must be a comparison. They then spend too long looking for a comparison and then write about one, even if they don't find one. So it is unusual in combination diagrams for the two diagrams to be directly compared. It's very unusual for that to happen. I have seen a few examples in the last few years, but it doesn't happen very often. So if you don't notice a very obvious comparison between the two graphs, then stop looking for it and don't write about one. It should also be noted that there may also be comparisons to be made between the data in the same graph. So, report structure. This structure can be used for every question in which you're given two different graphs. So, paragraph 1, sentence 1, paraphrase question sentences. There will normally be two question sentences, and you should combine them into one sentence by using and or while or whilst. This will allow you to produce a complex sentence and gain points for grammatical range and accuracy. Paragraph 2, so the second sentence of your report, overview on the two main features from graph number 1. Overview of two main features from graph number 2, and overview of any comparisons if necessary. So, your body paragraph, the advice is that it should be 3 sentences. And for paragraph 3, sentence 5, details of the first main feature of graph number 1, and details of the second main feature of graph number 1. Paragraph 4, details of the first main feature of paragraph number 2, details of the second feature of graph number 2, and finally details of any comparisons, if any. So paragraph 2 should just be an overview of the main features and should not include any details. The details come in paragraphs 3 and 4. So if we go back to our diagram and look again, and let's go through how we can answer this question. So again, let's look at the question. The pie chart below shows the main reasons why agricultural land becomes less productive. And the table shows how these causes affected 3 regions of the world during the 1990s. So let's have a look at the answer. So the graph displays the principal causes why farming land deteriorates, while the graph illustrates how 3 regions of the planet were affected by these factors in the 1990s. So as you can see, all I have done is change the words in the questions using synonyms. And then connected them using the word while. So if we look at the question, it says the pie chart below shows. In the introduction, I've written the pie chart displays. Then in the question, we have the main reasons. In the answer, we have the principal causes. The question says why agricultural land becomes less productive. I've got a spelling mistake there, we'll correct that. And in the introduction, why farming land deteriorates. And then we link the 2 questions together with while. And the table illustrates, so instead of the table shows, we've changed it to the table illustrates. And in the question, we have how these causes affected. And we have now how 3 regions of the planet were affected. And in the question, we have 3 regions of the world during the 1990s. And we have by these factors in the 1990s. So, again, simple word substitution. As I said before, don't try and overcomplicate things. Let's have a look at the overview. So, we can see clearly from the pie chart that there are 3 primary causes of farmland degradation. And overgrazing is the major one, whilst the table shows that Europe had a far higher percentage of unproductive land compared to the other 2 regions in this time period. So for this paragraph, I have picked out the main features from each graph and wrote them in a general way. Notice I have not included any numbers. We will support our ideas with numbers in the next 2 paragraphs. Also notice that I am using the present simple for the pie chart because there's no date, and the past tense for the table because it was in the 1990s. And that is often another feature of combination diagrams. Your 2 body paragraphs, frequently you will be required to use different grammar tenses. So let's look at the body paragraphs. So the pie chart represents 4 causes, with overgrazing representing the biggest proportion at just over 1/3. So the percentage has been changed to a fraction, 1/3. And widespread clearing of trees and the overuse of crops constitute nearly 1/3 and just over 1/4 respectively. So all the data there has been converted from percentages to fractions. Now, in the table, we've kept the percentages. So the table shows that nearly 1/4 of Europe's entire service had fallen victim to degeneration. Only a small proportion of North America's total land became less productive than 5%, and Oceania was marginally higher with a value of 13%. So I've used a comparative expression, marginally higher. But the vocabulary I'm using is, I've not introduced much new vocabulary. I have changed the form of some vocabulary. For example, I'm using degeneration instead of degenerate. But other than that, I've kept the vocabulary fairly simple and easy to read. But I made sure that the data I'm describing is accurate, and all the time I'm using comparisons. Let's have a look at another example. So this is a bar and a line graph combination. So let's look at the question. The line graph shows visits to and from the UK from 1979 to 1999. So we've got a 20-year period. And the bar graph shows the most popular countries visited by UK residents in 1999. Summarise the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So let's have a look at the diagram. So at the top we have a line graph, and underneath it a bar graph. So straight away you can see that on the line graph, all the lines are travelling upwards. And then when it comes to most popular countries, France is clearly the most popular, Turkey the least popular. But there are significant differences when comparing each of these countries. So the line graph is dynamic and the bar graph is static. So when you state what the graph shows, mention both of them. Here is a sample first sentence of the introduction. So question, let's go back to the question. The line graph shows visits to and from the UK from 1979 to 1999. And the bar graph shows the most popular countries visited by UK residents in 1999. So again, for the introduction, we have the line graph illustrates, so we put illustrates instead of shows. Then the number of visitors instead of visits to and from. We put the value in here, so in millions. And from the UK who went abroad, and those that came to the UK. So the question says to and from the UK, and we have put from the UK who went abroad, and those who came to the UK. And in the question it has from 1979 to 1999. And here in the example we have between the 2 years, between 1979 and 1999. And then we link it together with while the bar graph shows which countries were the most popular. So the question says the most popular countries. We simply changed it round to which countries were the most popular. And the question says visited by UK residents in 1999, and we've changed it to 4 UK residents to visit in 1999. So we haven't really introduced any new vocabulary. We've just played around with it, and in 2 or 3 instances just changed the format. Let's have a look at the overview. So the overview for this actually is fairly simple. So for the overview, you need to mention the key points from the graph. So when you do this, mention the most interesting things from each. So overall, it can be seen that visits to and from the UK increased, and that France was the most popular country to go to. Very simple overview, but it does meet the requirements of the examiner for a good overview. The overview is in 2 parts. One main trend or one main piece of criteria information from each diagram. That's what the examiner wants. And if we move down, so back to the diagram. And as I mentioned before, for the overview, the number of visitors to and from does increase over the period. Remember, when in the overview, we're not interested in how it's increased. All we want to state is that it has increased. Be more specific about how it is increased would go in a body paragraph. And then from the bar chart, because it's static information, all you can do is really state which country is the most important, so the most visited in this case, which of course is France. Body paragraphs. So if there are 2 graphs and a lot of information, you'll have to be careful not to describe everything, as you may then have too much information. So as I mentioned before, the examiner is looking to see you can select the most important things and not describe every detail. So the key skill when you have 2 graphs is being able to pick out the important information and summarize things in a concise way. So concise way means basically in a short sentence, not a very long sentence. Otherwise, you will end up writing too much and probably run out of time. So here is an example description for the line, line, and it should be bar graph, which is also a combination of a dynamic and static diagrams. So, first body paragraph, a look at the line graph reveals that the number of visits abroad by UK residents was higher than for those who came to the UK, and this remains so throughout the period. The figures started at a similar amount, around 10 million, but visits abroad increased significantly to over 50 million. However, the number of overseas residents rose steadily to reach just under 30 million, a difference of more than 20 million. So I have analysed by simply stating what the mathematical difference is between the 2 numbers. So 50 million and 30 million, the difference is 20 million. And then the second body paragraph, by far the most popular countries to visit in 1999 were France, at approximately 11 million visitors, followed by Spain at 9 million. Notice I have not repeated visitors. We don't need to. Only need to state visitors once. The USA and Greece were far less popular at around 4 and 3 million visitors respectively, whilst Turkey was the least visited country. So I've not used the numbers provided for Turkey. I just replaced the number with the expression the least visited country. So as we can see, the first paragraph discusses the line graph and the second the bar chart. You will not need to mix up the descriptions. This will only make things complicated and difficult to follow. So writing about the first one and then the second one is the best way to answer this type of question. And as with any task one, you need to make sure you use the right language, make comparisons, analyze and group data appropriately. So let's have a look at the last example today. So this is a pie chart and a bar chart. And it is a little bit unusual. I'll explain that in a minute, why it's unusual, but it is a little bit unusual. So this response is easy to follow as it firstly describes what is happening in the pie chart and then goes on to discuss the bar chart. This example has two pie charts from different years, so it is a dynamic diagram with a static bar chart. So to have two pie charts with different years happens less frequently than just having two pie charts. In the overview, you should mention the most important criteria from the pie and bar chart. So what's the question? So the pie chart shows the percentage of persons arrested in the 5 years ending 1994, and the bar chart shows the most recent reasons for arrest. So let's have a look at the diagram. So there at the top we have a very simple, two very simple pie charts. Each has got two pieces of information, which are people arrested and people not arrested, and the relevant numbers or percentages. And then the bar chart compares male and females and reasons for most recent arrests. And again, it's in percentages. So, and you can clearly see from that there are some quite significant differences. So let's again look at the introduction. So the pie chart shows the percentage of persons arrested in the 5 years ending 1994, and the bar chart shows the most recent reasons for arrest. So I've changed that to the pie chart illustrates, and I've then put the percentage of male and females instead of percentage of persons who were arrested from 1989 to 1994. So this replaces the 5 years ending 1994. And then I've linked them together with while the bar chart compares. So in the question, it's the bar chart shows, and then the main reasons. And the question says the most recent reasons. And then I finish it with that the different genders were arrested most recently. So the question says reasons for arrest. Again, there's no big words there, nothing complicated, it's easy to read. But I demonstrated to the examiner that I can paraphrase or substitute words. So back to the diagram. So how are we going to do the overview? Well, clearly we have to take one from each diagram. So with the pie charts, it's going to be a comparative overview of the two charts. With the bar chart, we could really focus on which is the major reason. That's quite easy to do. So let's have a look. What have we done? So looking at the pie chart, the proportion of males arrested is much greater than for females, with 32 arrested compared with 9% for women. So turning to the reasons for the most recent arrests, there were some clear differences. I think we've lost the overview from the slide. Oh, there we are, overview. Yeah, so overview, it is evident that the charts that males were arrested more than females, and that public drinking was the most common reason for arrests for both. So yeah, we can see that from the pie charts. A lot more males than females were arrested, 32% to 9%, and that public drinking was the most common reason for arrest for both. Yeah, so public drinking percentages are a lot higher than the rest. Quite a simple overview. Let's now go to the body paragraphs. So just change the mistake here. So looking at the pie charts, the proportion of males arrested was much greater than for females, with 32% arrested compared to only 9% for women. Because we only have a small amount of data in the pie charts, we can actually describe and compare it all in one sentence. But there's a lot more information in the bar chart. So look at the linking phrase, turning to the reasons for the most recent events. There were some clear differences between men and women. Men were twice as likely to be arrested for drink driving than women, at 26% and 14% respectively. Breach of order, theft and other reasons were also slightly higher for men, with all these offences standing in the range 12 to 18% for both sexes. So I haven't listed the percentage. What I've done, I've grouped them together and written a range of percentage, 12 to 18%. So when you have various percentages or numbers, don't list them, do a range from one to the other. Interestingly though, women experienced a higher percentage of arrest rates for assault and public drinking. The figures for assault were fairly similar, at approximately 18%, whereas public drinking represented the main reason for arrest, with women at a massive 38% compared to 31% for men. So in a small percentage of cases, no answer was given. So the limited data in the pie chart results in a one-sentence answer. You can, if you wish, combine both paragraphs into one, but make sure you use a linking phrase before describing the second chart. So for example, looking at the bar chart or turning to the bar chart. So, to summarize, so final summary of task 1 requirements. Do not describe all the data. Focus on trends and key features, such as the most important data or changes. Describe each main group of data and group similar data together. Use figures, numbers to support your description and comparisons. Keep to a 4-paragraph structure as much as possible. Do not attempt to mix data in the body paragraphs unless they are both dynamic. Each body paragraph must have one example of analyzing. Paragraphs must be linked together with linking phrase. And the overview must have 2 trends or most interesting, important criteria. So, as we're coming to the end of the workshop, as I said at the beginning, if you want a copy of these slides, then GLN will provide them to you. Has anybody got any questions before we finish? Next Saturday, I believe that we're going to have workshops all day at GLN Handico School. There'll be various teachers and so on doing workshops, and I will be there in the afternoon if anybody wants to come and talk to me. So thanks for attending the workshop. I hope this has been useful, and hopefully I'll see you next week, or I'll do the next Saturday presentation on the first Saturday in July. So have a good day, and good luck with your IELTS studying.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Không biết là các bạn có câu hỏi nào muốn hỏi thầy giáo của chúng ta ngày hôm nay không ạ? Nếu như mà không có câu hỏi nào thì chắc là chúng ta sẽ tạm dừng buổi học ngày hôm nay tại đây. Thì rất là cảm ơn các bạn đã dành thời gian để tham gia buổi học cùng với cả GLN vào sáng ngày hôm nay. Thì hy vọng là với kiến thức mà thầy chia sẻ thì chúng ta sẽ có những kết quả tốt trong cái quá trình mà luyện thi IELTS sau này. Nếu như mà các bạn có bất cứ một cái thắc mắc nào hoặc là những cái nhu cầu về luyện thi IELTS cũng như là học tiếng Anh thì hoàn toàn có thể liên hệ với GLN để được nhận được sự tư vấn của thầy cũng như là của các bạn tư vấn viên. Thì chắc là sẽ hẹn các bạn vào buổi workshop tuần sau nữa. Thì có gì thì GLN sẽ public ở trên Facebook cũng như là gửi email cho các bạn. Về phần tài liệu của thầy giáo thì bọn mình sẽ gửi qua email cho các bạn. Vậy thì cảm ơn các bạn. Hẹn gặp các bạn trong buổi workshop tiếp theo của GLN. Chúc các bạn có một tuần nghỉ vui vẻ. Bye bye Terry.
Bye.